There is a people whose entire name is simply their address. The Arabic for the great dry emptiness is Badia, and the one who lives in it is a Badawi, a desert person, and your century says it as Bedouin. And for 4,000 years, these desert people have made their home in the one landscape on earth that owns almost nothing. And out of that almost nothing, they built the tent that furls a storm, the animal partnership that outlasts empires, the poetry that founded a language's whole literature, and, most famously of all, out of the deepest scarcity anywhere, the most extravagant hospitality in the history of the human species, a code so absolute that a stranger walking out of the empty horizon at dusk becomes, the moment he touches the tent rope, a guest whom the household will feed, protect, and honor for 3 days and a third before anyone is even permitted to ask his name. Tonight, you are that stranger, and the horizon you walked out of is behind you, and the tent is ahead, and someone by the fire has already seen you and is already reaching for the coffee pots. So settle into your bed. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands rest wherever they are comfortable. There is nothing to remember tonight, and nothing to solve. If you drift off before the night is done, that is exactly what this story is for. You wake up on layered rugs in the guest section of a black tent, in the deep gold of late afternoon, and the sound that wakes you is the most famous rhythm of the desert, and it is being played right now, 10 feet away, for you. It is the coffee mortar. Brass, tall as a forearm, rung by its heavy pestle in a pattern that is not grinding but music, deliberately music. The host beating the crushed beans in a ringing syncopation. Loud strike, soft strike, double ring on the mortar's lip. A rhythm every tribe plays in its own signature, and every desert ear can read from a mile out on the evening air, because that is precisely what it is for. The mortar is the tent's bell, its invitation broadcast on the wind, and its message, rung out across the emptiness at this hour, is the oldest advertisement in the desert. There is coffee at this fire. There is a guest at this fire. Whoever hears this, come. You are lying, in other words, inside your own welcome. The rugs beneath you are the household's finest, unrolled for your arrival. The camel saddle at your elbow, draped with a sheepskin, is your armrest, the desert's throne of honor. Through the tent's raised side, you can see the fire pit and the row of brass pots and the man at the mortar, working with the unhurried ceremony of a craft that must never look like haste. And beyond him, the desert runs away red gold and shadow blue to the earth's very edge, utterly empty, utterly still, and the ringing of the mortar goes out over it like rings over a pond, announcing to nobody and to anybody, to the horizon itself, that at this one point in all the emptiness, tonight, there's fire and welcome, and you. Take the measure of the roof over you while the coffee is born, because the black tent is one of the great engineering answers of this whole journey. A building that solves the desert with the desert's own hair. They call it, beautifully and exactly, the House of Hair, Beit al-Shar, and it is woven, every span of it, from the black hair of goats, spun by the women of this household on drop spindles that go everywhere with them, woven on ground looms staked out flat on the earth, strip by long strip, the strips stitched into a roof that is warmth, shade, and shelter in one dark fabric. And the genius of it is in the weave, and the weave has two opposite talents. In the heat, dry, the cloth is loose, woven open so that it breathes. The weave passing air and even pinpricks of light, and a black roof in a burning desert sounds like madness until you stand under one, because the dense black hair drinks the sun into itself and radiates it up and away, while the open weave draws a continuous draft, and the shade beneath a black tent runs markedly cooler than the shade of anything pale and tight, the fabric working as a great dark chimney of relief, which the desert learned by living and your century confirmed with instruments. And then comes rain, the rare, violent, precious rain, and the same cloth performs its second trick, the one that makes engineers put down their coffee. The goat hair swells. Wet, each fiber thickens, and the open weave closes, the whole roof tightening itself like a drumhead, drop by drop, into a taut, dense, water-shedding skin, so that the harder it rains, the tighter the house becomes. A roof that is ventilation in drought and waterproofing in storm. By itself, with no one lifting a hand, made of the one material the household's own flocks grow back every year, cut, spun, and woven by the household's own women, who own it, by the way, the tent outright in the custom of this people. She who weaves the house is mistress of the house, and when the household moves, it is the women who strike it, fold it onto the camels, and raise it again at the next grazing. A whole home pitched in an hour, weighing less than its own furniture, and lasting, patched strip by renewed strip, a lifetime. Above you now, the weave is doing its dry evening work, breathing, sifting the late light into a fine constellation across the rugs. The house of hair purring faintly in the evening wind, the way rigging purrs, and the desert's whole architectural philosophy is over your head in one sentence. Do not fight the sun with mass. Shade it with something alive enough to breathe. The camp assembles itself around your waking in its evening order, and the census is small and complete. A world of perhaps 30 souls pitched in a shallow sandy basin where last month's rain left grazing. The tents stand in a loose line facing east, away from the prevailing wind, 5 of them, kin to kin, each divided by a woven curtain into its 2 worlds. The men's side with its coffee hearth, the women's side, larger where the household actually runs. The looms and the churn and the stores and the children, and between and around the tents, the evening's traffic is coming home. The flocks first, goats and fat-tailed sheep, flowing in from the grazing with the shepherd boys behind them, filing to the watering trough by rights every animal knows. Then the camels, couching one by one around the camp's edge with their groaning ceremonial complaints, great pale shapes folding down onto the warm sand for the night. And among the tents, the women are at the dusk milking, the ring of pails, the first smoke of the bread fires, a baby being handed sideways so a churn can be worked. The whole small nation of the camp, turning through its evening gears. And presiding from the guest tent's fire, your host, the head of this family group, a lean-weathered man of formal manners and amused eyes, who greeted your arrival out of the empty horizon with no surprise whatever, because the code does not permit surprise, only welcome, and who is now conducting the coffee with the gravity of a man who knows that his reputation, his family's reputation, and, in a real sense, the whole desert's reputation, are in the pot. Among this people, a man's standing is measured by his fire. The great compliment said of the truly generous is that his coffee hearth is never cold, that the ashes of his fireplace stand high, that his tent ropes are long, meaning his tent is wide, meaning the world is welcome in it, and hosts have beggared themselves for the honor of that sentence, and your host, who is not rich, has the high ashes and knows it, and is at this moment, in the quiet way of the code, entirely in his glory. And now the ceremony itself, which you must watch the whole way through, because coffee in this desert is not a beverage. It is a constitution, enacted nightly, and tonight it is being enacted at you. It begins with the beans, green and raw from the pouch, never pre-roasted, because the ceremony is the preparation. The guest must see his coffee born. Onto the long-handled iron roasting pan they go, over the coals, and the host stirs them with a slim iron rod, unhurried, watching the color walk from green to gold to the exact deep brown his grandfather taught him. The first great smell of the evening lifting off the pan and filling the tent, and then the beans are poured, crackling, into the shallow wooden cooling tray and shaken in slow circles while they tick and settle, and then to the brass mortar and the ringing music you woke to. The beans beaten, not ground, to a coarse, fragrant rubble, the rhythm carrying its broadcast out over the darkening plain. Then the pots, and the pots are a dynasty. The dala, the great long-beaked brass coffee pots standing in the ashes in their descending row, blackened veterans, and the brewing runs down the line, the largest pot boiling the water. The coffee added and drawn back to the coal's edge to murmur, never to gallop, then poured off through a fiber wad in the spout into the next pot down, and settled and poured again. The coffee refining pot by pot, like the metals of this journey, refined furnace by furnace, and at the end, into the smallest and brightest pot, with the host's own measure of cardamom pods crushed in, and sometimes a thread of saffron, the spice rising through the tent in the second great smell of the evening, and the small pot is nested into the warm ashes to wait, and the cups come out. Tiny handleless china thimbles stacked one inside another, and the tent, which is filled by now with the men of the camp arriving quietly on the broadcast, goes formally attentive, because the pouring is the point of the whole art. The host pours standing, pot high in his left hand, cups in his right, a thin amber arc, and only a splash to each cup, a third full, never more, because a full cup, in the desert's exquisite backwards courtesy, is a dismissal. Drink and be gone, while the small pour says, stay, there will be more. There will be as many more as you wish, and the first cup goes to you. The guest always with the right hand, received with the right hand, and it is hot, golden brown, unsweetened, tasting of roast and cardamom, and faintly of the fire itself, and you drink it in the 2 or 3 sips it is sized for, and hand it back, and it is refilled, and this will continue, round on round, until you tilt the empty cup and waggle it side to side. The desert's universal signal, sufficient, complete, content, at which the cup is retired with a small nod, and not before, and the whole vocabulary of it, the pour, the refill, the waggle, is spoken tonight from the Atlantic to the far gulfs. Wherever the black tents stand, the desert's entire theory of relationship, scarcity honored, abundance performed, freedom preserved, in half a cup of coffee refilled forever, until you say when, and threading through the coffee's whole liturgy, the tent's second atmosphere, the one your clothes will carry for days, and gladly, the incense. At the evening's height, the host's son brought out the mabkara, the little-footed brazier, charged it with a coal from the fire, and laid on the treasure crumbs of oud, the dark resinous heartwood of a far southeastern tree, worth its weight in silver along the caravan roads, and the smoke that rose was the majlis's crown. Deep, sweet, woody, ecclesiastical, and intimate at once, and the brazier then traveled, hand to hand around the circle, each man wafting the smoke into his beard, his headcloth, the folds of his cloak, perfuming himself and his dignity in one motion. The desert's cologne applied communally from a shared coal, which is this whole culture's signature in a single gesture. And the brazier's circuit is also, in the desert's wordless grammar, a clock. The incense goes around when the evening is complete, the crowning courtesy and the gentle closing bracket, and the old saying, quoted tonight with a smile as the mabkara made its round. Rules that after the incense there is no sitting on, the gathering dissolving in its perfumed good nights within the quarter hour. No host ever needing to hint, and no guest ever needing to be hinted at. The evening ended by fragrance instead of clock, which may be, of all the time, keeping this journey has collected. The bells and drums and conchis and floats, the single most civilized instrument in the set, and your own cloak, drawn now to your chin against the desert cold, gives up a thread of oud with every turn you make. The evening's whole architecture, coffee talk, poetry, welcome, archived in scent, on wool, till morning. And the word in your cup deserves its chapter tonight at its home fire, because your century starts a billion of its mornings with it, and has forgotten completely where the morning started. The Arabic is kahwa, and the drink's own legend, told at fires like this one, gives it to a goat herd of the coffee mountains across the southern sea, who noticed his goats dancing on the red berries, and whatever the truth of him. The bean's documented road runs from those mountains through the port of the southern straits, whose name still brands your century's coffee, up the caravan and pilgrim roads into the cities, where the first coffee houses of the world open, scandalize the authorities, survive them, and become the parliament of every neighborhood from Arabia to the Straits of Europe, and the word travels with the cup. Qahwa, softening in Turkish mouths, to kave, crossing to the merchants of the lagoon city as cafe, and docking in the north at last as coffee, so that the entire vocabulary of your century's espresso bars and drive-thrus and morning rituals is, at its root, one Arabic word, poured westward cup by cup across 3 centuries, and the desert, which adopted the bean from the first caravans and built this whole ceremony around it, gave the drink the thing the cities never quite managed, its constitution, the code of the pour and the refill, and the guest's first cup. And it amuses the men around this fire to whom the news has traveled, that in the far lands, the kahwa is now drunk enormous, alone, walking in paper at speed, and your host, refilling your third small cup with his thin amber arc, offers no judgment on this beyond the ceremony itself, performed a shade more slowly, which is, you understand, drowsily, watching the arc glitter in the firelight, the judgment. And now the law you are lying inside of, the guest law, the desert's crown, which must be told plainly because your whole night rests on it. From the moment a traveler touches the tent rope, or hails the fire, or is so much as seen approaching out of the empty distance, he is the guest, and the word is a legal category, the strongest one this world has. The household owes him, for 3 days, and the third of a day, the customary term, told and retold in exactly that lovely arithmetic, food, shelter, coffee, and protection, his safety becoming the family's honor, to be defended as the family's own, and owes him too, most delicately of all, freedom from questions. For 3 days, custom holds, no one may ask the guest his name, his tribe, his business, or his destination. He may be fleeing a feud. He may be the household's own blood enemy, and there are famous stories, polished by 1,000 tellings, of exactly that. The enemy fed and sheltered in ignorance, and then learned, protected anyway, because he had eaten of the salt, and the salt is stronger than the feud. He is asked nothing, and given everything, and when he leaves, the household's protection travels with him to the edge of their range. Why, in the poorest landscape on earth, the richest welcome? The men around the fire would shrug at the question, the code being to them simply what is done. But the desert itself answers it. In this emptiness, every soul alive will someday walk out of the horizon, hungry toward somebody's fire. The guest law is the desert's insurance, written in honor instead of ink. Each act of hospitality a premium paid into a fund that every tent draws on eventually. And the man hosting you tonight was himself, 2 winters ago, 3 days a stranger at a fire far south of here. Unquestioned, honored, fed, and the man who fed him had been a guest before that, and so on backward, fire to fire, for 4,000 years, an unbroken chain of strangers made kin for 3 days, which is, if you want the desert's whole civilization in one image, not the camel and not the sword. It is a stranger's cup, filled first, and before the supper comes, the passage this journey owes at every fire, and this fire's ledger has its own hard lines, which the code's beauty must not be allowed to blur. The desert's economy of honor has always had a second face, the raid. The gazu, the mounted swoop on a rival camp's herds, is an institution here, hedged with its own rules. Blood is to be avoided. The raided may raid back. Wealth circulates on hooves between the tribes in a kind of violent sport, and the poets sing it as glory. And it is also underneath the rules and the singing, taking by force from families who wake to find their livelihood gone, and the widow whose 3 camels are driven off in somebody's glorious dawn is not consoled by the meter of the poem about it. And this world holds enslaved people, has held them for as long as its memory runs, taken and traded along the very caravan roads the coffee traveled, serving in the tents of the wealthy, and the desert's code, so absolute for the guest, did not extend its 3 sacred days to them, and no telling of the black tents is honest that leaves them outside the firelight. You know the discipline by heart now, at the 14th fire of this long journey. The welcome you are wrapped in is real, and among the most beautiful things human beings have ever built out of nothing, the raiding and the bondage are real, and the same men maintained both. And the code and its exceptions grew from the same root, scarcity, which made hospitality sacred and made taking a trade. And the honest guest holds the whole of it, the filled cup and the driven herd, the unquestioned stranger and the unfree servant in one steady grip, and lets none of it cancel the rest, and sleeps when sleep comes with the full account. Because that is what an honest guest owes any house, in any century, in exchange for the salt. The supper arrives from the women's side as full dark settles, carried in on the great communal tray, and it is the desert's economy served in its own vessels, and it is better than it has any right to be. The bread first, and you watched its miracle from the fire's edge. No oven, no pan even, for tonight's kind. The dough, flour, and water and salt, worked and flattened, was laid directly into the hearth, onto a swept bed of embers and hot sand, and buried, and the desert itself baked it, and 10 minutes later it was drawn out, knocked and slapped clean of ash with a practiced percussion, and it emerges blistered, smoky, chewy, and improbably clean. The arbud, the ember bread, the oldest baking there is, requiring for equipment 1 fire and 1 desert. Alongside it, the tray's center, rice gone gold with fat and crowned tonight in the guest's honor, with lamb, a young animal killed for your arrival, which you understood when you saw the boy lead it away at dusk. To be an honor with weight in it, in a world where the flock is the family's whole savings, hospitality here is never a gesture, it is a withdrawal, made gladly from the principal. And around the meat, the desert's 2 great staples in their little bowls, the pairing this world's proverb calls a complete life, dates from the family's share in the palm groves of the oasis 3 days east, dense, dark, honey-fleshed, the desert's bread of sugar, the fruit that keeps for years, travels in a saddlebag, and burns slow and clean in the body, a food so exactly suited to this place, it seems commissioned. And milk, the she-camels in the wooden bowl, faintly sweet, faintly salt, drunk fresh at evening, and soured by morning into the tart Laban that travels the day's heat safely. And the old ones say, and your century's nutritionists, running the numbers on the pairing with some astonishment, have largely conceded that a man can live long and well on dates and camel milk alone. The palm and the herd between them covering nearly the whole ledger of what a body needs, which is the desert's entire agricultural policy. 2 crops, one of which walks, both of which keep. You eat as taught right hand, from your own sector of the tray, the host piling the choicest pieces before you with the tongs of his fingers and taking, himself, visibly less. And the meal runs unhurried under the first stars and ends with the tray retiring to the women's side and the children's side, and onward down the camp's whole gravity of rank and age until it returns to the fire polished. Because in the desert, a tray is finished, never merely cleared, and then the small cups come out again, and the little pot lifts from the ashes, and the ark of the kahwa glitters, and the night's second parliament convenes. The flocks have their own night quarter, folded close in the thornbrush pen on the camp's south side, and their evening arrival was the camp's pastoral overture, worth replaying at the edge of sleep. They came in at sundown, as they come in everywhere in this journey, in a moving cloud of their own dust, with the light behind them, 100 goats and fat-tailed sheep in the fluid, argumentative, self-organizing river that flocks have flowed in since flocks began, and ahead of them, astonishingly small for the size of his command, the shepherd, 9 years old, staff over his shoulders in the immemorial crucifix slouch, and his lieutenant, 7, bringing up the rear with a switch and enormous gravity. The desert shepherds are its children, promoted early into the oldest profession there is, and they are out with the flocks from the milking to the milking, navigating by hills they have named themselves, drinking from the skin, playing in the day's white silences, the reed pipe, the shepherd's flute that this journey has now heard on 3 continents, thin, wandering, 5-noted, the tune less a song than a boy thinking out loud, and the flocks graze to it, and the great emptiness swallows it. And it is. The men at the fire agreed when the subject arose. The first music every poet of this desert ever made, and the meter of the great odes, some of them will tell you, still walks at a flock's pace. Now the pen holds its warm woolly cargo in a single settling mass, the smell of it drifting the camp on the cold air, lanolin and dust and milk, the night's occasional bleat rising and being answered and subsiding, and the 9-year-old commander sleeps in the tent nearest his troops, staff by his rug, first up at any disturbance of his frontier, the smallest and most seasoned of the camp's whole company of guardians, dreaming, at this moment, in flock formation. Around the camp's rim, the camels have arranged themselves for the night, a dozen pale hills couched on the warm sand, and their sound will be under your whole night's sleep. So meet it properly, because it is one of the great unsung lullabies of this journey. They are chewing. A camel's supper is a 2-part affair, the grazing by day and then, couched at night, the long second processing, the cud brought up and worked, hour upon hour, in a deep, wet, rhythmic, grinding rumination, jaw sweeping side to side with the patience of a millstone, and a dozen camels chewing in the dark around a camp make a low, continuous millroom of soft grinding, punctuated by the sighs, groans, and cavernous stomach notes of the desert's most vocal sleeper. And it is, once your ear surrenders to it, profoundly settling. The sound of large animals entirely at peace, digesting a day that went well. And the animal making it deserves one drowsy chapter of respect, because the partnership between this beast and this people is the whole reason there is a camp here at all. The camel is the desert solved in flesh. The hump that everyone believes is water is in fact fat. The body's pantry gathered into one place so the rest of the animal can run cool and lean. A larder carried like a rucksack. The true water arts are stranger and better. A body that tolerates a thirst that would kill any other large mammal, then refills itself at the well in minutes, drinking by the barrel. Blood cells shaped to run smooth through thickened blood. A nose that reclaims the moisture of its own breath. Wool that insulates against heat as against cold. Feet like snowshoes for sand, and a temperament, the herders will tell you with rueful affection, of a dignified, opinionated elder who will do everything asked of it, eventually, under formal protest. She carries the tent, the wife's litter, the water skins, the loom, and the coffee mortar. She feeds the camp from her udder and clothes it from her back, and warms the bread fire with her dung, dried into the cleanest burning fuel the treeless desert owns. The old rough arithmetic of the tents prices a household's whole world in her, and the poets, who gave the lion 100 names, gave the camel, they say, $1,000. One of the great shapes now rearranges herself in the darkness with a groan like a ship's timbers, resettles her knees into the day's stored warmth of the sand, and resumes the long soft grinding, and the sound folds back into the night's floor, where it will stay till dawn. The desert's mill, turning slowly, grinding yesterday's thorn into tomorrow's milk, 10 feet from your rugs. All night, on your behalf. 2 more members of the household take their night stations as the fire settles, and both of them are aristocrats, and only one of them is allowed inside. By the tent's edge, curled nose to tail on a corner of rug she is formally entitled to, lies the Saluki, the desert's greyhound, and her presence indoors is itself the mark of her rank. For the dogs of the camp, the burly flock guards patrolling the perimeter now, live and die outside, but the Saluki is not. In the desert's careful accounting, quite a dog. She is the hunter, companion of the chase, since the Pharaoh's walls were painted with her silhouette, keen-eyed courser of hare and gazelle across the open pans, too precious to the pot and the pride of the household to sleep in the cold. And so custom, which forbids the dog the tent, admits the Saluki, the exception written in her narrow, elegant bones, and she has taken her rug tonight with the entitled economy of 5,000 years of precedent. One eye opening to file your movements, closing again, on duty even in her sleep. The fastest thing in the camp dreaming, feathered tail over nose, 8 feet from the fire. And on a padded perch by the tent pole, hooded, still as a carved thing, the falcon. She is the household's other hunting partner and its plainest luxury. A passage saker taken on the autumn migration, manned and trained through patient weeks on the fist, and through the cold months she earns her keep in the one currency the desert cannot otherwise mint: fresh meat on the wing. The hobara bustard flushed and taken in a low tearing flight. The men will describe around this fire all winter. Now, hooded for the night, she is a small monument of folded speed, rousing her feathers once with a sound like a shaken pillow and settling. And the tent holds in its 3 sleeping hunters the falcon, the hound, and the man, the desert's whole predatory economy at rest, all of it leashed, hooded, couched, and dreaming under one breathing roof of hair. Slung from the tent's shade poles, dark and beaded with its own sweat, hangs the household's most important vessel, and it is working right now, silently, on your behalf. The water skin. The kirba is a whole goat skin, cured and sealed, and like the matka of the far monsoon country and the porous jars of the old river, it runs the desert's one free machine: evaporation. The skin weeps deliberately, a slow controlled seep through the leather, and the desert air, which takes any moisture instantly, takes this and takes its heat with it, so that the water inside hangs degrees below the air around it, cool in the very teeth of the afternoon. The poorest household in the driest land on earth, drinking chilled water by physics alone. And the desert's whole hydrology hangs, in fact, from exactly this kind of intimate knowing. Because there are no rivers here, and no springs advertised by greenery, and yet this people crosses the emptiness in every direction in every season, and the crossing runs on memory. The wells. Every tribe's elders carry, learned by heart in boyhood, and rehearsed lifelong, the complete water map of their range. Hundreds of wells and rain pools and hidden rock cisterns, each with its name, its depth, its flavor, its season. This one sweet, this one bitter but honest, this one dry by midsummer, this one 3 days from that one by the line of those hills, the whole invisible network strung across the waste. Like the star houses were strung around the navigator's horizon, and a man's route between any 2 points is never the straight line, it is the beaded line. Well to well to well, the desert crossed the way a proverb is remembered, phrase by phrase. The deep wells themselves are the desert's cathedrals, some of them ancient beyond any tribe's memory. Stone-lined shafts sunk 10 stories to the water by hands nobody can name, maintained by everybody, owned in the last resort by nobody. Because the code that fills a stranger's cup at the fire scales all the way up, and its largest clause is the oldest one. You do not refuse a thirsty man the well, not your flock's worst enemy, not in the worst year. The wells stand outside the feuds, the way the guest stands outside the questions, and the whole quarrelsome, raiding, poetry-mad desert agrees on almost nothing except this: the water is older than the tribes and belongs to the thirst, not the digger. And the desert keeps one comestible secret so improbable that the fire's company saved it for last night's story hour and made the visitor guess and enjoyed the failure. After the winter rains, the desert grows truffles. It is true, and it is the year's great treasure hunt. Some weeks after the good storms, in the basins where the rain stood, the desert truffle swells underground, cousin of the jeweled fungi of the far northern forests. And the desert knows the signs the way it knows everything, by reading the faint doming and cracking of the crust that betrays the swelling beneath. And the old lore adds that the thunder itself calls them. The crop richest where the storms cracked loudest, the lightning's children, and whole camps turn out for the gathering. Families spread across the pans at the crouching search, the children competing, the sacks filling with the pale nobbled nuggets. And for a few weeks the poorest larder in the world holds a delicacy the city markets pay silver for, roasted in the embers beside the bread, simmered in the camel's milk, a taste like earth and rain and faint meat. The desert's own apology for the year's austerity, delivered underground on the thunder's schedule. Your century's botanists will confirm the kinship and map the chemistry, and the desert will remain politely uninterested, having held the operational knowledge for 4,000 years, where they grow, when, under which crust, after which storms. The whole science filed in the same unwritten library as the wells and the stars and the tracks. And the host's promise to you, at the fire, made with the formality of a man conferring a genuine honor, is that if the rains serve and your road ever returns you in the season, you will be taken truffling, a guest again, on the thunder's crop. The fire has burned down to its talking coals, the coffee pots stand off the heat, and overhead, through the open tent front, the desert has finished hanging its ceiling, and the men lean back against the camel saddles and look up, because this is the hour of the stars, and nowhere in this entire journey, not mid-ocean, not the winter taiga, owns a sky like the deep deserts, the driest, clearest, emptiest air on earth, with 4,000 years of attention pointed up through it. The Bedouin sky is a working sky, and it works 2 shifts. By night, it is the road map, the stars the desert steers by exactly as the great canoe steered, the pole star fixed over the northern rim, the known risings marking the directions of the far wells. A man benighted anywhere in his range, able to walk home on the sky alone. And across the year, it is the calendar, and this is the desert's own deep science, the anwa, the old reckoning by which the year is read in the dawn risings of the stars. Each season announced when its star first clears the horizon ahead of the sun, and the whole weather lore of the desert hung on the sequence. This rising brings the first cold. This one the chance of rain. This one the dying of the summer. The year told overhead in lights, and no rising in all the list matters like the great one. The star of the south, Suhail. The brilliant, far southern beacon your century charts as Canopus, whose first dawn appearance over the southern rim, late in the summer, is the desert's true new year. The promise made in fire that the killing heat has broken, that the nights will now lengthen and cool, that the rains and the grazing are coming, and the proverbs pile up around that one star like camps around a well. When Suhail rises, the night is safe for travel. The dates ripen, the year turns, and men of this people have wept, the poets claim, at the sight of it, which no one who has waited out a desert summer finds excessive. Tonight Suhail is up, riding low and bright over the southern emptiness, the year's promise visibly kept, and the host points it out to you with his coffee cup, the way another century's host would show you the barometer, and above it, the whole enormous machinery turns. The river of the galaxy running horizon to horizon, the known stars in their known houses, the desert's map and almanac and scripture unrolled to its full width. And nobody at this fire has ever once been lost under it, and nobody ever will be. And the 14th century of your long journey settles toward sleep under the best red sky in the world. Late, very late, the moon comes up over the eastern rim, waning and strong, and the desert receives it like a shift change, because in this land, the moon is not scenery, it is infrastructure. Under the full and near full moons, the desert reverses its day. The summer caravans move by night, resting out the furnace hours and marching in the cool radiance. The moonlight on the pale sands so ample that the trackers read the ground by it. The shadows of the dunes lying long and blue. The wells found, the miles made. The whole economy of travel shifted onto the night shift with the moon as its lamp. And the poets, who miss nothing, made of the moon-white night, crossing one of their oldest scenes. The rider, the silver plane, the star-checked course. Tonight, no one is traveling, and the moon performs instead its domestic office, the one it has performed over every open-air sleeper of this journey. The camp recomposed in silver, the black tents blacker, the couched camels gone to sculpted chalk, the thorn pen of filigree, the smoke of the banked fire rising dead straight into the still cold like a plumb line hung from the stars, and light enough, if a man woke and wished it, to pour coffee by. The Saluki lifts her head into it once, reviews her silvered frontier from rim to rim, finds it acceptable, and folds back down. The moon takes the guy ropes and lays their long shadows across your tent wall like the strings of some enormous instrument. And the desert, which has no rivers to catch the light and no leaves to stir in it, does with moonlight the one thing it does with everything. Holds it, entire, in the open, in silence, as if the whole silver flood were being stored against future need, which, in the desert's accounting, it may well be. And with the stars hung and the cups turning, the fire arrives at its true purpose. The one the coffee and the saddles and the whole architecture of the evening exist to serve. The talk. And in this desert, the talk, at its summit, is poetry. Understand what poetry is here, because it is not a pastime. This people, who build nothing permanent and write nothing down, made of the spoken ode their cathedral, their archive, their newspaper, and their supreme art, and the great odes of the desert, composed at fires like this one, memorized syllable perfect, and carried camp to camp by the Rawi. The trained reciters who are the living libraries of the tribes are the foundation stones of one of the world's great literatures. The classical poetry that the city scholars of the caliphates, Baghdad's own grammarians among them, treated as the gold standard of the entire language, sending collectors out into these sands to take down from illiterate herdsmen the most polished verse their civilization possessed. The desert, poorest in things, is richest in the one art that weighs nothing, needs nothing, and travels entire in a human head. Tonight's fire keeps the tradition at its household scale. An elder gives a stretch of an old ode in the rolling chant they are made for. The lament at the abandoned campsite. The ashes and the tent marks of the beloved's departed clan read like a letter in the sand. The listeners supplying the famous lines a half beat ahead in the immemorial way of audiences who know the whole thing. A younger man answers with verses of his own on last month's rain, judged on the spot, generously but exactly, by a jury that has been judging verse for 150 generations. And between poems, the stories, the feuds and reconciliations, the legendary hosts, the she-camel of miraculous speed, the guest who turned out to be a prince, the prince who turned out to be a guest, each tale worn smooth as a wellstone, and the rababa comes out for the long ones. The desert's fiddle, one string of horsehair on a skin-faced box, sawing its thin, plaintive drone under the teller's voice, less a melody than a horizon for the words to travel across, and the fire snaps, and the coffee arcs, and the camels grind, and the night's parliament proceeds at the pace it has kept since before the pyramids. The pace of a story being told properly, which is to say, with the ending nowhere in sight, and nobody wishing it nearer. And now the desert performs its nightly paradox, the one that surprises every visitor and no resident, and you feel it arrive on your own skin. The cold. The day was a furnace, and the night will come near to frost, and the swing between them, the widest of any landscape in this journey, has a clean, dry logic. Air holds warmth by its moisture, and this air has none. All day the naked sun poured heat onto the naked land with no watery haze to soften it, and now, the sun gone, the same nakedness works in reverse, the day's heat radiating straight up and away into the cloudless black. Nothing overhead to catch it and lend it back. No blanket of humidity such as softens the nights of the monsoon courtyard or the lake city. The desert's roof simply open to the universe, and the universe is cold, and the land's warmth pours up into it, like the coffee's steam, and by the deep night, the sand that burned at noon will chill the hand. And this is why the desert's whole wardrobe is wool, and why the tents of a burning land are woven for winter, and why the fire you are lying beside is banked now with the same evening care you have watched in the snows. The coals raked together, the ash drawn over, the kahwa pot nested in to stay warm for the night's last cups and the dawn's first. You are wrapped accordingly in the quilts and the great wool cloak the household laid on your rugs at dusk without being asked, because the code anticipates and the camp settles into its winter posture under the summer stars. The flocks folded close in their thornfold, the camels' own bodies cooling slow as banked masonry around the rim. The tent sides lowered and pegged snug by the women in a 5-minute operation that turns the airy day pavilion into a warm night den, and the last men rise from the fire, cloaks over shoulders, good nights given in the low formulas, and the desert's great daily tide, heat out, cold in, turns silently over the camp, and everything in the camp, having ridden that tide 10,000 times, is already trimmed for it, and so, wrapped to the chin in borrowed wool with your feet toward the banked coals, magnificently are you. Before the fire took the evening, in the last usable light, the host's eldest son gave you the desert's other literacy, walking you 100 paces out from the camp to read the day's mail, and the mail is the ground itself. The sand, he showed you, is a register, rewritten by every wind and signed by everything that crosses it, and the men of this people read it the way the Abbey read Latin, fluently from childhood, at a walking pace. Here, the neat split hearts of gazelle, 3 of them, unhurried, grazing as they went this morning, before the wind's edge softened the rims. Here the splayed soup plates of a camel, and not any camel, a camel under load. The prints pressed deep and even, moving east yesterday evening, and the boy can tell you, from the gate's length and the dung 40 paces on, roughly how far she will have gone by now, and whether she was one of theirs, which she was not. Here the tidy dotted seam of a fox, the side-winding brush-strokes of a viper crossing at dawn to cover, the frantic exclamation of a jerboa's leaps with the fox's seam converging, and the story's quiet ending in a scuffle no larger than a hand. The great trackers of the tribes are legend. Men who can name a camel's tribe from her prints, tell a walking man from a burdened one, an old animal from a young, and the law itself respects the craft. Tracks being evidence in the desert's disputes, read aloud before judges like documents. And the skill is not ornament. It is the desert's whole intelligence service, every camp's morning beginning with someone reading the night's perimeter. What came near, what passed by, what paused, and it is on that page, rewritten nightly and read at dawn, that the camp's ease rests, and the boy, folding himself back down at the fire afterward, gave the visitor the craft's first commandment with the seriousness of an initiation. The ground, he said, does not lie. Men forget, and stories improve, and the wind moves the dunes themselves, but a track, while it lasts, says only and exactly what happened, and a man who can read the ground owns the one book in the desert that has never once been wrong. And once tonight, if the wind obliges, the desert will play its strangest instrument, and the host mentioned it at the fire in the offhand way of a man mentioning a famous neighbor, because the great dunes to the south of this basin are of the kind that sing. It is one of the rarest and oldest wonders of the dry world, reported with awe by every traveler who ever crossed the singing sands, a deep, resonant, droning boom, like a horn held underground, like distant thunder that does not stop, rising out of a dune itself when its sand avalanches, sometimes at a footstep on the crest, sometimes at nothing, but the night wind loading the leeward face past its patience. Whole hillsides of sand shearing slowly downhill, and the shearing. By an acoustics, your century's physicists went to the deserts with instruments to unravel, setting the dry uniform grains vibrating in unison, millions of tiny collisions synchronized into one enormous note. The dune become a speaker the size of a hill, sounding a tone you feel in the rugs beneath you as much as here, for half a minute, and then subsiding, grain by grain, into the ordinary colossal silence. The old stories naturally gave the sound to spirits, to drowned caravans, to the drums of the hidden people, and the tellers around this fire keep those stories the way the Izba kept its house. Grandfather, with a smile that declines to entirely choose, and the boy who taught you tracks holds the modern desert view, which is that the dune sings because dry sand of one size, sheared sings, and that this is not one whit less marvelous. A mountain of loose grains that has, under exactly the right dryness, and the right slope, and the right night, a voice, and if it sounds tonight, far off, a long low note under the southern stars with Suhail riding above it, you are to understand, he said, that nothing whatever is wrong, that it is only the desert turning over in its sleep and humming. The women's side of the tent, beyond its woven divider, ran the true engine room of this evening, and its sounds, remembered now from the edge of sleep, deserve their accounting, because everything you have eaten, drunk, worn, and lain on tonight came off that side of the curtain. The loom first, the ground loom staked flat in the tent's shade through the afternoon, where the mistress and her daughters wove at the long black strip that will replace the roof's oldest panel before the autumn rains, the household literally weaving its own house ahead of the weather. The shed sticks thumping their soft rhythm under the talk. The churn and the desert's churn is its own invention. a whole goat skin slung from a wooden tripod and swung back and forth, by a woman who can swing it for an hour while conducting 3 conversations and a toddler. The sloshing beat of it, the camp's afternoon metronome, souring the morning's milk to Laban, gathering the butter that will be clarified over the fire into the sam that enriches the rice, the hand mill's stone circle grinding the wheat for the ember bread, the spindles, never still, turning wool and hair to thread in every idle-looking moment, exactly as the spindles of 13 other centuries turned in every doorway of this journey, the thread of the household lengthening through the gossip and the authority. Make no mistake about the curtain. The son advised you, half smiling, entirely serious. The men's side has the coffee and the guests and the talk of rains and raids, and the women's side has the tent, which the mistress owns, the stores which she rules, the children, the flock's daily fate, and the household's actual treasury. And a man of this desert who has won a poetry contest and rated famously may still be seen, at his own fire, glancing at the curtain before he commits the family to anything larger than a coffee bean, and the code itself, in its oldest tellings, gives the tent's protection through the women. The guest who reaches the women's rope is safest of all, because her sanctuary outranks even the majlis, all of which is worth carrying into sleep as a correction to the fire's own theater. The desert performs its honor on the men's side. It keeps its books on the other. Deep in the night, it is the silence itself that half wakes you, the way a train stopping wakes a sleeper, because the desert's silence is not an absence, it is a presence, vast and mineral, the loudest quiet of this entire journey, and you lie in it a moment with closed eyes while the camp's small night sounds file past on their rounds. The camel's mill grinding steadily at 3 stations around the rim, one of them sighing like a released rope. The fire's banked heart ticking once. The saluki rearranging her elegant bones on the entitled rug, one ear standing its watch independent of the rest of her. The tense weave purring in a passing air. The guy ropes taking a strain and easing. Far off in the direction of the singing dunes, a jackal states its case to another jackal and is answered, the 2 of them drawing the desert's sighs for you in sound, immense, occupied, indifferent. And through the open front, low over the southern rim, Suhail, exactly where the year's promise left it, holding its place among the wheeling houses, while the whole calendar turns overhead at the pace of the night's 1-hour hand. The waterskin sweats its slow degrees on the pole. The coffee pot sleeps in the ashes with tomorrow's first round already in it, and the silence closes back over the small sounds like the surface of a deep well and takes you down with it, fathom by fathom, wrapped in borrowed wool, insured for 3 days and a third, into the desert's oldest keeping. And as the deep night runs, let the desert's year wheel once over the camp, because this household's whole address is seasonal, and its calendar is written in grass and stars. The winter reigns first, the year's great lottery, the storms that wander the desert in ribbons, drenching one basin and ignoring the next, and the news of rain traveling the tents faster than any post. Rain fell in the east. The wadis of the east ran, and the whole map of the coming months redrawn overnight around where the water walked. Then, the desert's one green secret, the Rabi, the spring. The 6 astonishing weeks when the rained-on basins detonate into pasture and flowers, grass to the camel's knees where nothing stood in November, and the tribes converge on the green like guests on a wedding. The flocks fattening, the milk running surplus, the camps large and sociable and glad, the poets composing, the year's marriages made, the desert briefly, deliriously, a meadow, and everyone storing the weeks against the rest of the year the way the milk is soured against the afternoon, because the Rabi is the desert's whole argument that patience is owed. Then the long summer, the testing season, the camps falling back on the deep permanent wells and sitting out the furnace months in the palm shade of the oases, where the household's other economy waits. The family shares in the date groves, tended by the settled cousins, and the date harvest. In the late heat is the year's second festival, the tents pitched at the grove's edge, the climbing and the cutting, and the great sticky abundance, the year's sugar laid up in woven baskets, the bride wealth and the debts settled in dates, town and tent, trading their two worlds' goods in the harvest dust, and then Suhail, rising at dawn over the southern rim into the tired end of the heat, the sky's own signature on the year's turning, and the night's lengthening, and the first scouts riding out to read the ground for the first rains, and the whole cycle leaning forward again toward the wandering storms, the camp striking and raising, following the grass the way the grass follows the water, and the water follows the sky. A household whose address is, and has always been, wherever it last reigned. Which sounds, to a settled century, like homelessness, and is in fact the opposite. The largest home in this whole journey, 1,000 miles wide, roofed with the best red sky on earth, and carried, complete, on 6 camels. And before sleep takes the last of you, walk the fire's evening once more, cup by small cup, touching each thing as you pass it, and letting it go. The mortar's ringing syncopation carrying its broadcast over the emptiness. There is coffee at this fire. There's a guest at this fire. Whoever hears this, come, let it go. The house of hair breathing through its open weave, and the rain that tightens it, drop by drop into a drum-taut roof, ventilation in drought, waterproofing in storm, woven and owned by the women who raise it. Let it go. The high ashes of a generous man, the tent ropes long, the coffee hearth never cold, and a host not rich, entirely in his glory. Let him keep it, and let it go. The beans born green in front of the guest, the color walked from gold to the grandfather's brown, and the Dala dynasty refining the kahwa pot by pot down the row. Let them go. The thin amber arc poured standing, the third full cup that means stay, and the little waggle of the empty cup, the desert's whole theory of relationship, refilled forever until you say when. Let it go. The word itself, ka-wa, softening westward mouth by mouth into every morning of your century. The goat herds dancing goats, and the ceremony the desert kept while the cities took the cup. Let it go. The mobkara traveling hand to hand, the smoke wafted into beards and dignity from a shared coal, and the evening ended by fragrance instead of clock after the incense. No sitting on. Let it go. The 3 days and the third of a day, the guest asked nothing and given everything, the salt stronger than the feud, and the chain of strangers made kin, fire to fire, 4,000 years without a break. Let it go. The ledger held in one steady grip, the filled cup and the driven herd, the unquestioned stranger and the unfree servant, none of it canceling the rest, and sleep taken with the full account. Let it go. The bread baked by the desert itself under embers and sand, the lamb that was a withdrawal from the principle, and the dates and the she-camel's milk, the 2 crops that cover the ledger, one of which walks, both of which keep. Let them go. The 9-year-old commander and his flock-paced flute, the first music every poet of this desert ever made, asleep now in formation, staff by his rug. Let him go. The camel's mill grinding at the camp's rim, yesterday's thorn becoming tomorrow's milk, the pantry carried like a rucksack, and the beast the poets gave 1,000 names. Let her go. The saluki on her entitled rug, not quite a dog by careful accounting, and the hooded falcon rousing once like a shaken pillow. The camp's whole predatory economy asleep under one roof of hair. Let them go. The kurba weeping itself cool on the shade pole, and the water map carried in the elders' heads, well to well to well. The water older than the tribes, belonging to the thirst and not the digger. Let it go. The lightning's children swelling under the cracked crust, the thunder's crop roasted in the embers, and a standing invitation to go truffling, if the rains serve. Let it go. The moon running the desert's night shift, the trackers reading by silver, the smoke rising dead straight, like a plumb line hung from the stars, and light enough to pour coffee by. Let it go. Suhail standing low over the southern rim, the year's promise made in fire? The sky that is roadmap by night and calendar by year, and nobody at this fire ever once lost under it. Let it go. The odes carried syllable perfect in the reciters' heads, the abandoned campsite read like a letter, the rababa's one string sawing a horizon for the words, and the richest art in the poorest land, weighing nothing, traveling entire in a human head. Let them go. The day's heat pouring up into the open universe, the sand that burned at noon chilling the hand by midnight, and the fire banked against the desert's nightly winter, with the dawn's first round already in the pot. Let it go. The ground that does not lie, the gazelle's split hearts, and the fox's tidy seam, the one book in the desert that has never once been wrong. Let it go. The dune that sings when the night wind loads it past patience, a mountain of loose grains with a voice, the desert turning over in its sleep and humming. Let it hum, and let it go. The loom staked flat in the shade, weaving next autumn's roof, the churn swinging on its tripod, and the curtain behind which the honor is banked and the books are kept. Let them go. And the Rabi, the 6 delirious weeks of grass to the camel's knees, the tribes converging on the green like guests on a wedding, and the largest home in this whole journey, 1,000 miles wide, carried complete on 6 camels. Let it go. It is all still there, and all still circulating. The desert's promise is a nomad like everything else here, and it keeps itself by moving, cup to cup, well to well, fire to fire. The mortar will ring somewhere tomorrow at dusk, and somewhere a stranger will walk out of the horizon toward it and be asked nothing and given everything, and the chain will lengthen by one more link, as it has every evening for 4,000 years, including this one, including you. So your hands can let go of the day, your shoulders can let go of the day, and your thoughts can waggle their little empty cups now, side to side, sufficient, complete, content, and hand them back to the fire with a nod, and draw the borrowed wool to their chins, and let the desert's great silence come down over them like the lid of a well, gently, for the night. One last thing, and the desert should say it in its own arithmetic. 14 centuries of night watches have kept you on this journey, and tonight's is the strangest and the gentlest of them all, because tonight, no single person is awake. The host sleeps. The boy sleeps. Even the Saluki's open ear is technically dreaming. What stands guard over this camp is the code itself. The 3 days and the third. The salt already eaten. The honor already engaged. A structure of pure custom, invisible, weightless, older than every wall in this journey, and stronger tonight than any of them, because a wall can be climbed, but the guest law of the desert has held fire to fire for 4,000 years, and it is holding now, over your rugs in the dark, requiring no sentry, burning no lamp, the watchman that never sleeps because it was never awake, only agreed upon, forever. The mortar is silent, its message delivered. The pot sleeps in the ashes with the morning already in it. Suhail is riding the southern rim, right on time, keeping the year's word. And the silence has come down over the camp like the lid of a well. And beneath it, insured, salted, wrapped, and watched over by an agreement older than the pyramids, the desert's newest guest, 3 days rich, is doing the only thing the code requires of him. Sleep now. in the house of hair, under the promise-keeping star. Good night.